Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Grants Ad Hoc Committee of December 4th, 2023. Attendance has been taken, noting that Councilors Miller, Kyle, and Garneau are online. Moving to approval of the agenda, can I get a mover and a seconder? Mayor Bailey, Councilor Pierce, all those in favor? And all those opposed? And carried. Moving on to declaration of pecuniary interests. If there's any now, please speak. If there's any later, let us know. Seeing none, we'll move on to delegations, petitions, and presentations, of which are none. So moving to 5.1, adoption of the minutes from the previous meetings. Can I get a mover? Councilor Miller, Councilor Garneau, all those in favor? All those opposed? And carried. Any business arising from the minutes? Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologies that I missed the last meeting. So on page 4, under the staff reports there, 8.1, kind of about halfway through it, it's got discussions. Discussion was held surrounding involving the Brant Community Foundation in the grant process, noting that despite the fee involved, outsourcing to the program to an external agency would provide standardization and allocation of the funds. Heather Boyd outlined the potential discussion topics, including evaluation criteria, review of the program, elements, funding levels, ongoing approvals, etc., and the evaluation process. I'm just curious, was there conversation had when it comes to grouper applicants, like because I know we had kind of broached the subject before, that the possibility of an applicant only being able to submit a request in one of the groups. I'm not sure if there was conversation had on that, and if it was, how did that end up?
If I recall, we did have conversation in regards to grouping applicants when they're applying multiple categories or multiple tiers of organization. I believe that was passed on to this report upcoming.
Okay, I didn't see it in there, but that's good. Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Without any other further business arising from the minutes, we'll move on to staff reports. 7.1 RPT-0513-23 Community Grants Proposal. Heather Boyd.
Good afternoon, through the chair. Thank you very much. I have submitted my report for your review. Basically, kind of an answer to Councillor Pierce's question, what I'm proposing is that at this meeting, if committee is inclined, we would establish the basis of our program. So do we go forward with the Brant Community Foundation, working forward with that partnership? I do expect we'd have one more meeting in January that would specifically go over our criteria, our eligibility, and the scoring matrix. And the matrix may even get pushed off a little bit because it doesn't have to be before the applications come in. But definitely, if we are moving forward with the foundation, I've had them send me a couple samples of grant application forms to give us some ideas. I do think the evaluation criteria requires a pretty decent discussion amongst the committee, because there's pros and cons to all the things. We could keep it very scoped and limited and restrictive in what we let people apply for, or we can keep it open, and there's good and bad in both of those. So I think if we're moving forward in that direction, and even if we're not, then we still need to look at those kind of on a one-by-one basis. Do we want to allow this type of use? Do we want to allow this type of group? Do we want to restrict how many? Do we want to restrict numerous applications in the different categories, or do we want to restrict by number? Right? So there's a lot of things I think we need to look at. I think if we do go with the foundation, they're also good at pulling together, like looking at, okay, this group's already got this funding, so maybe they don't need this funding. And they have more of an opportunity to do that kind of looking at it from a big picture than it is when you just do a purely technical review. But I'll go through my report. So basically, what I've done here is I've analyzed what it looks like going forward with Brant Community Foundation. So we've had a few meetings with them. They're absolutely interested in serving and helping our community. they already do some grant giving in the county, and they certainly do the city's grant program, so they have plenty of experience. Almost half of their board members are county residents, including their chair, which is the county's former clerk, Jane Carmen. So there's a lot of people at the table who really know how to do this grant giving. For me, I think one of the biggest benefits to the county of going with them is the idea that it really gives a chance for the board to look at it from a how does this serve the community best perspective. You don't get that in a staff technical review. It's really not our position to say that Group A keeps things in the community and Group B, like that's really a qualitative aspect that I think we tried to capture when we had council was going to do that massive scoring on like 30 criteria. But that was it was overwhelming, and it was a really big ask of 11 members of council to score on 30 criteria, then pull that all together and try to sort it out. That was probably a too big a ask when we put that forward a few years ago. So some of the benefits, consistency. So they did this all the time. They have a very good process on how they review them. So they would review them the same every year. Efficiency. So the cost would be about $30,000 out of our grants award money. I'm not saying that it costs exactly $30,000 for staff to do this in house, but with the council and committee time involved, and there's certainly definitely a good part of that's going to be an efficiency that takes it out of our work in 2025. Improved grant delivery, I think I've already talked to that. That's really where I think you're going to hit the best bang for the buck, is that it's going to be a better product, a better overall divvying out of the funds. In terms of timing, so they're perfectly happy with the timing that we do. I think the city does theirs late in the year, so I think us doing a spring, early winter, spring one works out perfect for them. And then I get into talking about the ongoing pre-approved grants. We've had some discussion about whether we continue these, whether we not. In my mind, we haven't really given enough notice to the three groups that have had them forever to just say 2024, you're not getting them. And the two ag societies, we literally just started giving them a pre-approved grant. So it's up to council, but I would recommend that would be difficult to pull back right off the hop. Budget allocation for the grants. So this is where we had a recommendation that we go with the 0.5%. And I have a lead out there what that looks to be. It ends up at $300,000 going out of the community. One of the questions asked at the last meeting, which I didn't touch on in the report, but I do have a little presentation on, is what this looks like in comparison with our other jurisdictions in the area. So, Briar, can you bring that up? So one of the things we were asked to see what other municipalities are doing in terms of the actual grant funding numbers. So I did look at a bunch of municipalities, looked at Norfolk, Hamilton, Haldimand, Woodstock, London, Brantford, and Guelph. Now, before we get too far, I will say it is difficult trying to compare grant programs between municipalities because everybody does them differently. Some of them have different grants for different purposes, like they have arts and culture grant, and then they have a sports grant, and they all do things a little bit differently. So I've gone through them. I've tried to do the best I could at figuring out what they're spending on their grants, but I will say, like, I haven't put a lot of names as to exactly which municipality is spending which money, because I don't know for sure if I've dug through and found every single place they're giving money for things. Based on a per capita basis, so this is the spending. Brant is the first one in this series, so we are spending about $9.11 per capita on our grant program. There are two municipalities. Norfolk is at zero right now because they didn't do a 2023 program. They're suspended doing a full review as well, so they haven't issued anything yet. And Haldeman, I couldn't see where they actually matched up in the same kind of grant program. They had like a beautification grant, but it was a different thing. I don't know that it was the same. So this is where those municipalities shake up. Per capita, we're pretty high. Well, we're the highest of the group. If you get down to like a percent of our net levy, we're not the very highest, but we are certainly, once again, we're the first one in that first bar of that list. And we're certainly well up there in terms of the total amount that we give. So that was just to answer the one question that we were asked at the last meeting.
Would that be the end of your presentation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Councilor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So through you to Heather. So just to confirm, those numbers are based on what we usually give as opposed to last year when we chopped it in half.
Correct. That's not based on the half. That's based on our total grant budget.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any further questions for Heather here? Councilor Pierce, then Councilor Miller.
Thanks. So on the report in general, or just a little extra that she had there?
Just for Heather at this moment.
Yep. Okay. So, sorry. Okay, so that answered that. So we were at 0.5 prior to last year, cutting it in half, so that's fine. Bear with me here. You spoke of the pre-approved ones, Heather, and I know that's been an ongoing topic for a while, because some of them have been around, like you say, for, ever and a day. Do you recall, and I was trying to think of it, was it just going forward, or do we set end dates on those? I can't recall. Like, for example, if I look at Scotland Optimist and St. George Lions, I know that as long as I've been on council, we've done that. I can't recall if there was an end date on that or if that was just going forward.
Some of those were pre-amalgamation. Some of those have been around forever. I don't think we ever set an end date. I think it was 2019. We did look at them again. And I wasn't really involved in the grant, so I didn't pay the most attention, but I think we did discontinue them. We haven't ever set like formal agreements or termination dates or when we would end. So
okay, so that might be something that we want to do. Okay, one other question I had, bear with me. It's actually not until the report from Community Foundation, so I'm good with your report. Thank you.
Councilor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Heather. Heather, a couple of questions. A group applies, Brant, we go this route. Brant Community Foundation says no. At that point, I guess they would have leave to appeal to council directly, I assume.
There's nothing that says that council can't grant money outside of the program, right?
Yeah.
I think we should be pretty careful of the precedents we set at the get-go that, if you've applied and you weren't accepted, like, we need to be really careful if we start another process of letting them come back to council. I think I spoke to, like, if it's a big ask, if someone's coming and they need like $100,000, which they're never going to get through the grant, then maybe that's something that council can consider. But I think if they're eligible for the grants, I think council needs to be careful. But nothing would say that we wouldn't let council can do whatever it wants, so it can approve whatever money it wants to give out.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's always something you can always approach council. So I guess that would be the appeals process. And I don't see a lot of them doing that, but yeah, we'll probably see one or two. Second question. What about they've missed the cutoff date for appealing? You know yourself, we get a lot of these through the year. Emergency grant, would we still use the Brant Community Foundations throughout the year, or do we just use it for the start of the year?
I would suspect that we would certainly be able to use their decision matrix. I think they've got other commitments throughout the year, so I don't know that they would want to go back and reevaluate, because they reevaluate based on the amount of money they have. So unless by chance one year we underspend again, which is possible, but not likely anytime soon. I don't know that they'd be accepting grant applications throughout the year. But if there was a pot, we could use their scoring matrix ourselves, or we could refer them to the next year's money, or council could consider them on the side without going through the process.
Okay, I'm just maybe we could put that in the next report that for anything that comes outside of that, it either goes to council or grant community foundations may deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Kyle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Heather. So just going back to the ongoing or pre-approved grants for a second. So setting aside the Ag Society ones for a second, and just looking at those Service Club ones, are those for something specific? In other words, are they using that money to funnel into something that's providing a service that we would have to have our staff otherwise do? In which case, I'm wondering, rather than canceling them as grants per se, if that were to move to more of like a budget item, is that something that would be a reasonable? We're not pulling the plug on them, but I'm just thinking. To me, a grant is something it's not really pre-approved necessarily. It's more for a project that's kind of out of the scope of normal. So if they're providing service for us, so our staff doesn't have to, like looking after a hall or something like that, maybe that's better as more of like an invoice.
Yeah, and I don't know if this applies to all three of them because I don't know all the circumstances, but I know that part of it was that some of these groups had like facilities, like parks. I think one is the soccer parks in St. George that they provide. They took it on to build it to on their property, and they provide this facility that we don't have to provide otherwise. So I think that was part of the reasoning why these got into it in the first place. Part of it was that we couldn't maintain them for the cost that we were giving to these groups. So that was the reasoning at the time that these were last reviewed when I was around.
Councillor Miller, and then Mayor Bailey.
Well, just to build on what Councillor Kyle asked, I know for a fact the Scotland Optimus Club gets 19,000. They've been getting 19,000 for years and years, and they use that money to maintain the Optimus Park out in Scotland. So I know if that was taken off of there, it would go on Parks and Rec budget. And my guess, I don't know for sure, but my guess is it would probably come in at 25,000 or 30,000 as a budget line item. So, but I agree. I'm not sure if these belong there. I know we talked about it a couple of years ago. Maybe that's something we should think about taking off. But for now, that, like I said, I just want to clarify with Councillor Heather's answer to Councillor Fowler.
Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Councillor Kyle, maybe you could help me out here. We were at a meeting. With the fairgrounds, and we had some discussions about the granting. And during the time of the meeting, we were told that the fairgrounds in Paris gave away, I believe it was, what was that, $150,000 or $115,000 a year in free rent for the fairgrounds. When we gave them 10, they gave away, was it 115 or 50?
It was something in that ballpark for sure.
Yeah. And they were giving it to people that they thought needed a break and couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Yet they were taking our money to start the pot. So when you hear things like that, Councillor Kyle and I were both a little distressed, especially when that same meeting we were told that not everything at the agricultural ground has to be about agriculture, and someday there might not even be a beef show there. And we were sort of put in our place as councillors to the fact that times are changing. Well, I'm suggesting that if times are changing and these people are allowed to give away over $100,000 in free event space when they're asking us for $10,000 and we freely give it, then something needs to be reviewed. That's all I have to say about that.
And just one thing to that, I know that the Paris Egg Society, one of the things that they do give free is room to the Meals on Wheels group uses their kitchen. And I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, they had come to the county looking for space, and we had referred them on to the fairgrounds and had kind of agreed that we would help pay their rental cost for that kitchen. So that's part of that money from the fairgrounds.
Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The mayor raised a note that I had made as well, albeit in a different context. So for opening that conversation with regards to criteria, about a month ago, I was at a community group meeting that I'll leave nameless at this point, but that received a community grant through this process, and they too were looking at where they would then donate some of the money that they had in their bank account, which was quite substantial. So I'm wondering, and perhaps the Community Foundation can give us some guidance on this as well, but if we might ask a question of this year's applicants as to whether they do donate or give complimentary various things to other community groups. Because this community group, similarly to the fairgrounds, was making donations to another group that they took borrowed meeting space off of but didn't pay for. So it's kind of a complicated story, I think, some of the interconnectedness of the groups that we receive grants to, or that we provide grants to. But maybe we want to get some clarity on that, and perhaps the Community Foundation might help us in untangling some of those relationships to really see where everybody else is at. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and absolutely, the foundation will take any direction that we give them in terms of what we want to see, in terms of whether we make it an eligibility criteria that the money needs to be spent by their group or in our community, or whatever we want to set for eligibility criteria, or is it just part of the scoring matrix and that you get a better chance of getting a grant if you meet some of these criteria. So there's lots to consider in terms of the eligibility and the criteria.
Councillor Pierce, then Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. And just to kind of add to that, I know, Councillor Miller, you'd recall that we had discussions in the past that we wanted the receivers of these grants to come back to us the following year to say, hey, this is what I applied for a grant for this. This is what it was used for, just so we can kind of, cross-check that, so to speak. And I think that would pick up things like that as to, if they're using it for something different than what was on their application as well. And I know we spoke of that a few times, but kind of got away from it. And there was even talk about when we started the matrix that may or may not be involved in the scoring of it. Did you come back and advise us that you used your grant for X, Y, Z, which is what you said. So that may be something that was one of the questions that I had for once we get into the foundation report, if they require that. But that's something that maybe we need to implement as well, because you're absolutely right, Councillor Garneau, that I'm sure, unfortunately, that may happen more than what we know, right?
Yeah. Our application form does now say, how did you spend the money? But we haven't had the resources or anything to go back and compare them between years and report back out on all that.
Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, through the chair, I think this committee too will feel better when they know all the rules that the foundation has in place, like having all the addresses and names of the board members of all the groups that apply, and make sure that everyone doesn't live in Waterloo and Ancaster and Burlington, and there's no connection to the county at all. It's just something that they promote in the county or something like that. So the monies are leaving the county, then coming back in the form of an event that, even if a failed event, it's still an event that they will tell us that they tried to do and failed. And I think the other thing too, to Councillor Pierce's comments when we first started, is you don't get something from each category. That's something that the foundation is very careful on doing. So we don't pay for your rent and then pay for your budget to make the costumes and then pay for the tickets to run the event. Like, it doesn't go like that. You don't get 32, 52, $72 for the same event. So I think that's what you were talking about. This last time we did the grants, we had one person who got 3 big chunks of change, even at the discounted amount of money that we were giving away, still did very well. Oh, it was the fairgrounds. Yeah, well, they need money to give away apparently. So yeah, so they are very careful about all of that. So they do really spend a lot of time, and I'm glad to hear that Jane Carmen is the incoming chair because she does know the county very, very well. And I think she's the one that we're lucky that she's in place for our first round with the foundation. So I feel really good about that part.
Seeing no further questions to the presentation, do we have questions for the report? Councilor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. This is for the foundation report?
Correct.
Okay, so, yep, let me just scroll down here. So again, it's another pet peeve of mine when people fill out these applications and they're incomplete, to your point there, Mr. Mayor, about, where they are and stuff like that. And I've always been, especially when it comes to financial reports and stuff like that, my way of thinking is if you can't take the time to fill it out properly, unless of course this is your very first year of doing it, then sorry, you don't get anything. I'm just curious how the foundation, because it says on the bottom of page 14, it talks about so applications would be continued to receive PDF along with all required information is what's put in there. So my question is, do we know or can we ask the foundation what they do and how they process or not process what's classified as incomplete applications? Do they go back to them and say, hey, you know what, you failed to complete this part. Please do it and send us back to us. Or is the onus on the applicant that's filling it out to ensure that they fill it all out the first time? Like to Heather's point, I'm sure the foundation, like we're not the only fish in that sea, so I'm sure they're quite busy doing other applications as well. So do they have the time to go back and forth with these folks, even though part of their report does say that they will lend assistance at filling the report out? If you're having problems filling it out, they would help you go through it. So I'm curious what they deem and how they handle incomplete applications is my one question. And then when it talks about the software, we'd have to buy our own license. Do we know the cost of that license, and is this a yearly renewal of that license, or is it a one-time fee and we have the license?
Through the chair, so in response to the first question, they will once again, they'll take their direction from us. So they will work with the groups, especially new groups. They'll help them out. They have education, like here's how you fill out the application. I imagine if somebody's sending one in 2 minutes before the deadline and it's incomplete, they're not likely going to be providing any assistance. But they'll take their direction from us, whether we say, if it's missing things or what things are like critical that we don't want the application to go forward based on. They'll take that from us as that's what I get into. Like that's eligibility criteria, right? Like if it doesn't meet this, it doesn't go forward. Then the evaluation criteria is the more softer, like you get points for this and that. Right. So they'll take their direction from us on that. And I imagine in the first year they'll be helping more than future years. We'll also have staff in 2024 that'll be helping send groups this direction and helping them fill out the forms and making sure that people do get their applications submitted on time and complete. So that's the way that process works. The second question, in terms of the software, I spoke to Anne Marie this morning. I'm not at liberty to give you the number, but it is certainly it's a reasonable software license. It would be an annual license fee. It's something we don't have to do. It's something we can look at for 2025 because we never get it implemented for 2024 anyways. But it is certainly, it's not ridiculous. I was concerned too. I thought it was going to possibly be a huge number, but it's not a terrible license fee for the software it is. So.
Okay, so just a follow if I could. So that's great. I think that's definitely a harsh conversation we have to have on that first one because, as we know, sitting around this horseshoe, it seems to be the same ones year in, year out that don't supply all the information. I fully appreciate the work the foundation does in helping new people out and helping them fill out the form, I think that's fantastic. That's great. But if we continue to get the same ones without the information, I'm in full favor of sorry about your luck. You're only going to do that once and not get it, then you'll learn going forward. That's fine on that. As far as the licensing, do we know, is this a license that belongs to the foundation, or is it just an external software that they also use?
It's a software provider that they have a license for the city of Brant grants, that we could also buy a license for our grants.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair, the other thing that they do very well is, especially when we put it out there, if we do decide to use the foundation, and it says right in our all of our information that the grants are going to be handled by the foundation, they will tell them whether they qualify or whether they don't right from the get-go. So they'll say, oh, well, you don't qualify for that, but if you did this or if you did that, they play with them a lot at the very beginning, so they don't waste anybody's time. But they will, they will say to them, they will send it back once, or they used to send it back once and say like this doesn't line up or whatever. They will play with them once, but they don't fondle them and they don't keep going. But they do tell them whether they qualify or whether they don't, and they do give them guidance as to what they could do to qualify, not next time, next year. So they don't make it so that they've got a whole new application coming forward in 10 days because they obviously didn't know what they were looking for this year. But they'll say, if you do this and you do this, and you have a board of directors and you're a not-for-profit and you do this and you do that, next year you could get this. So they do a lot of things like that, and they do that once.
All right. Are there any further questions as to the report or the presentation? Seeing none, do we have someone comfortable with moving the recommendation? Councilor Pierce?
Prior to doing that, Mr. Chair, I'm going to throw the elephant in the room that if we're talking, and I know, Heather, you said you don't know exactly how much it'll be as 10%, but the report here says that for the grants we put the 0.5% as we have in the past. What do we do if council proposes, as we did last year, to put another 50% into the hospital fund?
There will be something coming forward in December to talk about the hospital funding plan. So if by chance council puts forward that 50% of this go towards that, then we would be sending to the foundation like $150,000 to give out as grant money, and then they would get they're based on a 10%. So if they'd be $150,000 to give away the $15,000 to give away the $150,000.
Right, and okay, that's fine. But where I was going with this is, would it be friendly, cordial to just give them we don't know at this point in time, but heads up, this may or may not happen? Like, I'm not sure if that'll deter them if we're only talking 150 rather than 300, just for numbers' sake. If they would still be willing to do it, I don't know. I'm hoping they would, but I wouldn't want to all of a sudden have their expectation that we're going to be giving them $300,000 to approximately $300,000 to divvy out, which gives them approximately $30,000 for their work, and then all of a sudden we go, by the way, it's actually only 150, so you're only going to get 15. That's still 15 in their pocket, but I'm wondering if it might not be a bad idea to just maybe give them the, hey, heads up, this may or may not. This is what we did last year. Not sure if we're going to do it this year. I don't know. I don't know what the right thing to do is.
Yeah, it would be my position if council approves this recommendation as I've written it, the intent would be to give the 0.5% of the budget. It wouldn't be to go back and then cut that in half. So that would require council to make that as a reconsideration or as part of the 2024 budget, or be it what it may. The budget can change every year, but I don't know that we would be setting up we might be cutting this in half if it's not on the table at this time.
Yeah, I'm just, like I say, again, Like, to get where I'm coming from here, I don't know what the expectation is, and I'm not saying that it is or isn't going to happen, but if I'm looking at it from the foundation point of view, I guess I'm looking at it in two ways. I'm looking at it in a sense that, you know what, the county's come to us, this could be $30,000 for our efforts. Perfect. So we're going through with that mindset. Sorry, this is through you, Mr. Chair. And then all of a sudden, not 11th hour, but all of a sudden that changes that, oh, you know what, it's only going to be 15,000 for our effort, because their effort, whether it's 15,000 or 30,000, their process is still going to be the same with the same number of applicants, right? Potentially. So I'm torn with that. I've been thinking about that for a few days now. I don't know how to do it.
Mayor Bailey.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Heather, was the factor that cut us in half last time, wasn't it the hospice, not the hospital?
No, it was the hospital.
It
We
was the
put that
hospital.
towards the reserve for the new hospital.
It was the hospital.
Yep.
So maybe now that we have a new plan for the new build of the hospital, and we have a hospital foundation set up to raise money, it might make a difference. We might be raising the money through the committee and not through the councils. I don't know whether that would help or not, but there's been a lot of things happen with the hospitals since last time we gave out grants. So that might stop the motion from being made, or maybe the motion won't be supported next time because of the damage that it caused last time with the little guys, having to close up or not be able to give programs. So I don't know whether that would make a difference because we now have something set up for fundraising for the hospital. I don't know if the support would be there to take the money away from the people that need it now and not something that's going to happen in 10 years.
Thank you. Do we have anyone to move the recommendation? Councillor Kyle.
Mr. Chair, through you, just wondering, there's 5 recommendations in the report. Do we want to maybe go one by one with them?
If that's
or
the
do we
will
want
of
to move them at once?
if that's the will of the committee, then certainly. So in that case, do we have a mover for clause 1? Councillor Pierce and Councillor Garneau. Any discussion on clause 1 here? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? None carried. Clause 2, do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Pierce, Councillor Kyle. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And carried. Clause 3, do we have a mover and seconder? Or do we have a recommended? Councillor Miller.
Sorry, you're looking for a mover.
Yes. Or do we have alternate?
Well, I moved it to get it on the floor, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And a seconder. Councillor Garneau. Discussion. Councillor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree with the commitments, the ongoing pre-approved grants as previously approved, because that's something that we've already committed to. I would like to change the to be reviewed during. I would like to review that in 2024 at some point to put us into a situation going 2025 whether we're either going to continue on with it or change it. I don't want to wait till next term. Looking for a seconder.
Mayor Bailey. Councillor Garneau, are you seconding this?
I can second it, but I was going to make the amendment if Councillor Pierce had not.
Okay, perfect. In that case, do we have any discussion in regards to that amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? Carried. Any discussion on the recommendation as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to clause 4. Do we have a mover? Councillor Garneau, seconder. Councillor Kyle. Any discussion on clause 4? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that is carried. Do we have a mover and seconder for clause 5? Councillor Pierce and Councillor Kyle. Any discussion on clause 5? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. So that is 7.1 dealt with. Moving on to communications, we have none. Moving on to other business. Any items of other business for the committee? Councillor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So just quickly in regards to that last point there, do we think that, Heather, you were saying probably another meeting in January, do we feel that we could have the criteria finalized by that point? Sorry to make you go back up there.
Yeah, we will jump on board with the foundation starting this week. We'll start working on that. We'll have a proposal to this committee. We'll probably need a meeting pretty early January. Get it approved by council the end of January so we can release our applications the end of January and February for receiving them.
Excellent. And one last one, while she's up there, Mr. Chair, thank you through you. When you're speaking to the foundation, can you inquire as to how they do, what they consider non-complete and how they handle those applications?
Yep, absolutely. I will get some more details on that.
Perfect, thank you.
Seeing no other, Mayor Bailey?
I just want to make a comment, Mr. Chair. At any point that this committee finds me in conflict because of me being on the foundation for so many years and stepping off the foundation's chair to become the mayor, if I do go into the wrong lane, please, I won't be offended. Just let me know that I'm doing it and I'll stop talking.
We will do so. Thank you, Mayor Bailey. Seeing no other business, we have nothing in camera. So our next meeting will be at the call of the chair, presumably sometime early January, and looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Garneau, we are adjourned.
I don't think you're